Alrighty everyone, welcome back. Now that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is slowly releasing into theaters around the globe in different portions of course, the world, we have seen a lot of great reviews coming out of Australia, Hong Kong, and a lot more than that. And given that Indy 5, the Dial of Destiny box office collapse is only getting worse and worse day by day, there's been a lot of issues arising out of this, given that we have, of course, people out there like Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy with their jobs on the line because of what's going on with Indiana Jones 5 and more. But on top of this, the board over at Disney is only being, of course, the main source of creating more issues for the entire scenario. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support, and let's get right into the subject. Now, we know one major thing about Indy 5 right now is that Kathleen Kennedy basically viewed this movie as essentially her key to obtaining and keeping her legacy intact over at LUCASFILM, which failed terribly, as we all witnessed before our very own eyes. We have seen the movie, flip upside down, and that a lot, of course, had to do with the fact that she overly requested Disney to hand her an extra $100 million to put into this movie that was so unnecessary. That is also, the main factor in why she dug such a deep hole for herself that she really can't get out of right now. So there's a lot of blame games happening in many of the emergency meetings that have been taking place over at Disney and Lucasfilm, and what's been going on with that, and how that's only creating more tensions and chaos over at Disney, the board, and specifically for Bob Iger. Now, on top of this, with those like Kathy Kennedy and Leslie Headland completely mishandling the Star Wars franchise, however, one major development involves Kathleen Kennedy and her role at Lucasfilm. Now, behind closed doors, Kathleen Kennedy is said to be doubling down on Indy 5 sequel that is now in active development, and that even many of the members of the board are pushing through with plans for a sequel as the blame game continues on the marketing being the main issue for the low box office rather than the creatives and the story itself. Now, Kennedy and many members of the board are described to be doubling down on the sequel, focusing on both Helena and Teddy, regardless of Phoebe Waller-Bridge's recent firing from Disney for the Lando series, and from 4 other Disney movies that were unannounced and in early development. The reason for this push is that they see this as the only way to pursue for an Indy 5 sequel. Now, further, on the other end of the board, many of them are fighting this big development happening between Kennedy and the board that embrace these plans for an Indy 5 sequel featuring Helena. Now, let me just add more to this quick, guys. We know that there's a lot of things going on right now with Lucasfilm, and given that there's a lot of problems arising out of all of this between Harrison Ford and how this really was basically his favorite character in his career. I mean, to see that he really got involved with this project is sad. The fact that he agreed to sign up for this project for a paycheck. And again, I've said this many times, at that age of 80, as, a world famous actor, I would be thinking more about my legacy rather than a paycheck. Seriously, I would have just let things be with Crystal Skull because it was, in a distant past anyway. Let it be, and that's just how it should have been. I don't think that there was really room or need for an Indy 5, to be honest, guys, but with Kathleen Kennedy now pursuing an Indy 5 sequel and what's been going on behind the closed, behind closed doors over at Disney, and what's been unraveling between herself, the board that is loyal to her, alright, at least some members of the board that are at least, and how there are other members of the board that are fighting against this, just goes to show you that they really want to make this Indiana Jones universe, or whatever you want to call it, work. And I've said this several times, there is no way in this world that we are ever going to see an Indy 5 sequel. I really do not see this happening, but Kathleen Kennedy and some of those board members are doubling down on this to make it a Helena story featuring Teddy as well, to continue it on after the events of Indy 5. Now, this is where things get even worse, because this kind of contradicts what Kathleen Kennedy said about making this possibly into a TV series. Let's get into it. Now, she further goes on to elaborate. Kennedy, of course, on top of this, alright, she went on to dive more into this. when she actually went on forward with the board. Now, Kennedy is even going as far to push it to be a movie instead of a series, similar to what she is doing with the Rey movie for the Star Wars franchise. Kennedy's plan is to pursue a Helena movie to take place after Indy 5, and doesn't want to necessarily label it as a spin-off, but to have it serve as a direct sequel to Indiana Jones 5. Other members of the board are trying to shoot down these plans being put together between Kennedy and her loyals on the Disney board, and are calling for her firing during the recent emergency meetings as tensions heat up after a big loss of revenue from the box office collapse for Indy 5 now that Mission Impossible 7 is essentially opening up to the public globally. Bob Iger is reportedly on the fence about an Indy 5 sequel currently, where he stands as a, of course, person who's on the fence of this entire situation and is a firm believer in the marketing being the cause of the box office collapse. Now again, we have people out there like Steven Spielberg and Bob Iger and even Kathleen Kennedy and Phoebe Waller-Bridge who have been pointing fingers at the marketing being the source as to why the box office, projections went from 1 billion worldwide to what now they are labeling as 800 million worldwide. And that just makes absolutely no sense even to this day. The last time I checked, I believe worldwide it was 200 plus million, and still that's not looking good at all because you have Mission Impossible 7 on the horizon. Coming out, basically tomorrow, everywhere, and after that you have the 12th, which is the official release, and that's where you're going to see this financial freeze for basically Indiana Jones 5, where you are already going to see, and I'm already beginning to see it for several movie theaters across the board, where you can see them slowly trickling out of the theaters. If you go day by day and looking at the show times, it is diminishing very fast, much like The Flash. Very near similar, by the way, to The Flash. And, that's the problem. And it's very accurate to what a lot of you guys have been reporting back to me about how your theaters were very empty when you were looking up the theater seats on Fandango or MovieTickets.com. A lot of the theaters had pretty much, only 10 to 30% seats sold for the most part on even opening night. And that's a really bad telltale sign, even right from the get-go, that this movie was in a downward spiral before it even really, got the box office results to begin with. So that's an interesting element here. And as to why these board members are so loyal to Kathleen Kennedy, at least, a good chunk of them, like 40% give or take, are really catered to her vision, and her overall motive for Lucasfilm is just a disgrace to all fans of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and anything Lucasfilm, right? So, anyways, alright, I think that a lot of people need to realize that things need to change, and everything related to Bob Iger, he has to get out. They have to fire him and get somebody else on board that is more reliable and more responsible. So, anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this entire situation, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.
Gun in hand, we are alone again. From night to moon, we hear them moans again.